welcome everybody. Let's talk real estate. Your weekly BS with Barry Saywitz about the current commercial real estate market here in Southern California. As we take a no BS look at both sides of the issues driving this market today to find the best solutions going forward. With our man right in the middle, it's Barry Saywitz. Hey, Barry.
Hey, good morning, Paul, and good morning to all of our viewers and our listeners out there. Welcome back. It's Tuesday. We are post-St. Patty's Day. I am Barry Saywitz, president of the Saywitz Company. Welcome to another edition of Let's Talk Real Estate. If it's one thing that I've learned in my 30-plus years of doing this, it's to try and surround yourself with good people, get good information, and then try and make good decisions. And we're going to try and do that again today. And if we can't, we're going to make something up that you can take away with you. So, with all of that said, for everybody out there who's Irish or pretended last night, I hope you're feeling well this morning. I want to welcome our guest, Barbara Perrier, Vice Chairman of CBRE Commercial Real Estate in Los Angeles and Southern California as a whole. Welcome to the show, Barbara. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, appreciate you coming on board. You and I share some similarities in the past, and so I want to start by rewinding at least a couple of years for both of us. We both went to UCLA, so go Bruins for everyone out there. And you got into real estate right out of college, as I did as well, really at the height of the commercial real estate, or all the real estate markets in the 80s, and then watched it quickly turn around and go the other way. I guess my question was, what prompted you to want to get into real estate out of college? Was there a motivation or an epiphany, or just fell into it?
So I basically got into it through my sister, Darla Longa, who's now my business partner, and we've worked together now for, many years. But our father, who was in the steel manufacturing industry, told us that industrial real estate was the best profession for women. Little did he know there was 0 women in the profession at the time. So we listened to Dad. Dad knows best. And we both followed into industrial real estate at Coldwell Banker and the many gyrations of our company at the time.
Which had to be a challenge for many reasons, because commercial real estate's not an easy thing to do, number one. Number two, in most instances, certainly back in the day, you're working on commission, and so you're just hustling to try and make a deal. But then being a woman at that time, really there were almost no women in real estate, and it was really perceived as a man's position. And so I'm guessing you faced some challenges just in general, but then also just being a woman and surrounded by men all day.
Yeah, for sure it has come a long way today from where we started out. And there was really no role models at the time. My sister and I were trailblazers, is how I would put it, in a man's world. But there was really an advantage, I thought, because I felt like we were different than everybody else, and you got to use your differences to your advantage. And when you talk about the market quickly cratering after we both got into it, at that point, I hadn't built up a lifestyle. I didn't know any better. So it was just like, get your nose to the grindstone, work hard, and try to make a good living.
And if you were working on commission and you made 0, and your friends were making at the time $25,000 plus or minus, it wasn't that big of a difference. There wasn't some huge disparity. But I remember I did an internship at Grubb & Ellis, which was the competitor to Coldwell Banker back in the day. And my mentor, or person that I worked for, whatever you want to call it, she went to UCLA, and she was a woman, and she was very successful and also one of the very few. And I remember her telling me that it's not for the faint of heart, commercial real estate.
No, not for sure. But happy to be a veteran for 36 plus years.
And you've seen a lot of changes, not only in the dynamics of the brokerage business, because you've been with a company that candidly is the largest brokerage company in the world in Southern California. For CBRE really is the main hub and foothold where there's just the majority of market share. The company's been around forever, but also just the changes in the growth of Southern California, the changes in the dynamics for Orange County, for the Inland Empire, because those were really fledgling markets back in the day.
Yeah, there's no place, industrial real estate in Southern California is here to stay. And the reason is we've got the ports of LA and Long Beach. We're not going anywhere. It's one of the biggest, it is the biggest industrial market in the United States. So from my perspective, it was a great market to be an industrial real estate broker. I started in leasing and transitioned to capital markets. We do a ton of work out in the Inland Empire, which we've seen grow tremendously. And from what it was where we'd have to race to get people out there to get them interested in, now it's the largest industrial submarket in the United States.
And one of really the only areas where you have potential capacity, although it's much less today, to build something and get some land, because in LA and Orange County, it's just not really readily available.
Correct. And the market for land anywhere else but Inland Empire is very tough. You're tearing down buildings, you're redeveloping, and it's getting tougher and tougher. So California, no joke or no faint of heart to be the developer in this market, because they make it very difficult to get anything entitled or approved. And we have new laws that just got passed this year, AB 98. So it's getting harder and harder.
Yeah, no question. I remember going to the Inland Empire, and you'd get out, you'd have to hold your nose because it smelled like manure. And that's just not the case anymore at all. It's its own economy out there, and it's thriving. But even that market, I did leasing. I remember doing leases at 25 cents a square foot, and today is 5, 6, 7 times that in terms of the rent. That market has had its challenges in terms of managing the growth over the years. But I'm curious as to your thoughts in terms of just going forward long term. It really is a place that people need to be, and it's a regional hub for distribution.
The last 2 years have been a little tough. The reason is, coming out of COVID, we had a hockey stick rent spike that happened. And it happened so quick, and it happened all over Southern California, more so than any other part of the country. And the tenants had to absorb those huge, almost 100% rent jumps. So now, coming off that, the last couple of years, there's been some rent falling and some adjustments that have been made. And so that's been difficult for investors to know how to underwrite the market. But long term, you're right, it's going to be here to stay. This is a thriving economy. Southern California is not going anywhere.
Yeah, and I find that the industrial markets in LA, Orange County, and Inland Empire are somewhat interrelated, in the sense that as the rents by the port or on the west side of Los Angeles go up just because of supply and demand, and because there's just very little opportunity and everybody wants to be near the port, that drives the market in the Inland Empire up, where it stays just a notch below Los Angeles, but will follow the trend.
Absolutely. And what we've seen recently is a maybe movement back in, because rents have come down a bit, and people could find things closer in at less rates. It's all about the drayage cost. So how much does it cost per container to get from the Port of LA out to that warehouse? And
do you find, because it used to be that you could hire workers much less expensive in the Inland Empire than you could in Los Angeles, do you find that over time that the wages have somewhat balanced themselves out, and that a lot of those people really live further east, and so therefore being further east, not only because of the drayage, but the fact that I've got a built-in employee base out there that I can tap into more easily than maybe in Los Angeles?
Most companies are going to do surveys of where there's available employees. And what we found is the Inland Empire, because of the cost of housing and availability of housing, you can find a larger workforce, and that's a huge component of being able to relocate to a new location.
And do you find in today's market, while the rents certainly spiked on the industrial side and office markets went the other way, the fact that even though they've pulled back over the course of the last 18 or 24 months, they're still at levels that are, in my opinion, ridiculous relative to the historical of the last 20 or 30 years?
That's what's so hard for people to understand.
Because people have short-term memory.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. We've doubled rents, and things are much better than they were. And like you said, they were flat for a long time.
Yeah.
And then they hockey sticked, and now they're leveling out. So what we look at is, like you said, the historics, and we are well above historics.
Yeah, it used to be we're arguing about a penny on the rent, right? Because in California we do rent on a monthly basis because we're weird. But I remember we'd have clients arguing for a penny, and then now you're arguing for 10, 20, 30 cents a foot. It's much bigger tranches.
The most difficult thing in my world today is when I'm underwriting a deal for the capital markets, everybody has a different view of what rent is. And so what we're talking about is sometimes a 10, 15, 20 cent spread of what one investor would underwrite versus another. Huge impact on value. Also operating costs. Insurance has gone up, power availability. There's a lot of different nuances that have come into the foray of when you're looking at a deal today versus before.
No question. And there's all those different components. We'll try and cover as much as we can because we could go all day with it. But so for those viewers out there, capital markets is investing, right, versus leasing, where I'm a landlord or a tenant and I'm leasing. So when you're talking capital markets, you're either packaging a deal to sell to an investor, or you're representing an investment group or an investor to go out and find property to buy, right? And so part of that is getting a return on your investment, whether that's in-place rents today or that's value add or future rents long term, right? And so it used to be when the rents were running up, smart people would say, I don't really care about today's rents. I'm going to buy it at today's rents. I'm not going to fight the price. And then hopefully tomorrow's rents are higher and I'll get my return at the end of the day. But it's very difficult for people to just walk in and say, hey, why would I spend $300-400 a foot? Why would I get a 3 or a 4% return when interest rates are at 6 or more? And those dynamics have flip-flopped.
For sure. What we were seeing is interest rates have had the most impact on us today as we look at underwriting because the cost of debt has gone up. And again, going back to that historic, it's still lower than some of the times when we were starting out. But people have to look at the yields that they're getting in comparison to the debt that they can get and what the upside is. And one of the things that I see today is investors are looking at a big mark-to-market story. So maybe this lease is a vintage that it was signed at 50 cents a foot and the rents are now $1, but they have to wait 3 or 4 years. Patient investors might wait longer, 5 or 6 years. But once that happens, there's a huge NOI run-up, and that's what they're counting on.
So somebody who's looking at it over a 10-year period would just say, hey, I'm going to get a lesser investment in the first few years, but I'll get my return at the end of the day.
Yeah, patient money, core capital. There hasn't been as much core capital in the market today because of some of the redemption queues that have been out there, but it's coming back. So in 2025, we're starting to see the return of core capital, which is music to our ears because those are the more patient investors that are looking for quality real estate that they can have a decent IRR over a 10-year hold.
Do you find that there's still a number of tenants out there that own their own building that may have bought it once upon a time? The owner of the business is getting to the point where they want to retire or looking for an exit strategy, and then they're looking to either do a sale leaseback to an investment company and then just shed the real estate and pocket the money. I know there was a lot of that going on before when the rents were running up.
We're seeing it both ways. We're seeing a lot more users who want to now buy because prices has come down, that part. And we're also seeing people that have had companies that are seeing the debt of the company debt running up and they might need some liquidity. So they might want to do a sale leaseback because their value of their real estate has gone up so significantly. We see both. We also have seen infill owners looking at redevelopment, so selling to a developer that might tear down a building if they have an older facility. So all of those things are on the table today. Users are in kind of full force and effect because they have more buying power and selling power.
So on the user side, it seems to me, like we have these conversations all the time, which is if I have to pay $1.60, $1.70 triple net, and I compare that to the cost of getting a mortgage, even at a higher interest rate, it still might be worth it for me to buy the building if I've got the upfront monies available, because at the end of the day, I'm just paying a landlord rent. I get nothing for it versus building some equity. And so that would be a motivation to try and buy something. But the flip side is it's very expensive.
That is true. And I would say that one of the motivating forces for somebody to try to buy is because they want to control their destiny.
Yeah.
They don't want somebody running up their rent 50%. You should see the conversations we were having over this last cycle when somebody realized that their rents over doubled. And they're like, wait, I didn't expect that. I hadn't budgeted for that.
You tell them and then you duck so that nothing gets thrown at you.
Exactly.
But it is, and look, for a company, it's all right to the bottom line. That's just profit, pure profit at the end of the day.
That's why some of the 3PLs are struggling right now, because they're looking at the margin of their warehousing. So they're renting out their warehouse to the logistics companies, and their margins are thin anyway, and now rent's gone up. So it's been a little bit difficult. First time in my career that I've seen some of these 3PLs give back space versus just taking on more.
And that was partly one of the causes of the run-up, especially near the port in Los Angeles, which is that you had these 3PL spaces gobbling up space, not really pushing back on what the rents were because they were passing all of that cost on to their customers, and they could still afford it, whereas a user, a typical tenant, may struggle with whatever that rent number is.
Yes, correct.
Let's talk about the investment side and interest rates, because there's no question that the higher the interest rate, unless you're buying it with just all cash, your cost of funds is higher, and therefore it puts pressure on the deal itself. Are you seeing cap rates, or have you seen cap rates move up with the fact that the interest rates are higher, or they have not really moved?
Well, so certainly in Southern California, cap rates have come up. And what's weird is that they're the same as the rest of the country, which makes no sense to me, having worked in this market for as long as I have, that I could buy the same deal in Southern California at the same cap rate as I could buy in markets like Cincinnati or Columbus or Dallas. So we always got a premium in Southern California. That is gone. Right. And interest rates and some of this volatility that we just talked about is part of it. But I do feel like Southern California is a good buying opportunity right now. Cap rates are in and around a 5 cap, which seems to me, as you look at debt, it could be negative leverage. However, the mark-to-market story in most cases and the value-add component of it, and then maybe the safety of being in industrial real estate versus maybe some of the other product types, are causing investors to want to invest.
And look, there's plenty of reasons to invest into industrial real estate. Number one, the market and the demand is there, as opposed to the office sector where people still are either in a hybrid scenario or didn't come back to work, or companies are looking at shedding costs, so they want to reconfigure and take less space. The other side of it is the cost of tenant improvements, right? So on the leasing side of things, I guess let's talk about that for a minute. We have clients on our side that we represent that need higher amounts of tenant improvements, and nobody's really excited to give it to them because, number one, I'd just rather rent to somebody who doesn't need it. And then number two, it's really expensive. And so I'd rather have you pay for it than me.
Industrial's always been a popular class of investing because it doesn't need as much tenant improvements as office. And you have a kind of consistent demand. So usually when you're looking at the packages that you give to an industrial tenant, there's significantly less investment on the capital side from the landlord. So that's an attractive.
Yeah, no question. And the buyers that are out there today, who are they? I know you guys are one of the largest investment groups in terms of representing companies that are out there. So I'm gathering that the client mix is across the board. But do you still see an influx of foreign money? Is it REITs? Is it groups of investors? Is it private individuals? Is it all the above?
Right now, we are seeing more private individuals. They weren't able to buy at the height of the market. They didn't like our cap rates when we were sub 4. They're in the market now. I think they feel like it's a relative value. We're seeing pension funds come back. They still have constant investment. And a lot of folks have been on the sidelines for the past 2 years. So this year they're back with more of a vengeance. We're seeing REITs, although they're more selective because some of their share prices have been hit. So we see a whole kind of combination of different buyers. The good news is there's liquidity in the debt market for industrial. And I feel like folks think it's more of a safe haven. So I think all different types of investors are looking at it right now.
And what do you hear from the banks? Because it seems like they would be more excited to do industrial deals for all the reasons we're talking about. Less capital improvements for tenant improvements for fit up, less long-term exposure, and certainly a better deal and more excited than doing an office deal.
Yeah, the banks are back lending on industrial. We're excited about that. Like we said, there's plenty of liquidity for industrial, and groups will compete over getting the debt. So we're in a good position from that perspective. Obviously, interest rates are where they are, and we don't expect, I think people are now just settling in. Let's just live with where interest rates are and start doing business versus waiting for the next rate cut.
And is the pitch, because I hear it on the multifamily side all the time, where people say, oh, you could buy this at this cap rate, and then when rates come down, you can go back, which doesn't really hunt, because number one, you put middle to longer term debt on the property. You can't just go back tomorrow and decide to refinance. There's penalties and costs to do that. And then secondly, you're just betting on the fact that the rates are going to come down and who knows how much and when. So you have to underwrite it based on what you know and what you got sitting in front of you.
For sure. And I think people have come to that point. I think when rates first started running up, people didn't want to admit that, and they were hoping that this was all going to go away. But I think in 2025, people are saying, we just got to get to business and get these deals done.
Do you find that from a seller's perspective, they're still trying to hold on to yesterday's number and yesterday's dollar and point to yesterday's interest rates and say, what happened to my 4 cap and why can't I get that number?
I think if sellers are in the market today, they understand it. That wasn't the case over the last couple of years. But today, I feel like people who are in the market are more realistic. The exception to that is land sellers are really reeling because the value of land went down so significantly so fast because of folks wanting to have less risk and a higher return on cost. So that's where we're feeling it probably the most, where land sellers are still not coming back into the market just because of where land has gone.
And so they'll just fight another day. I feel like there's a lot of folks out there, regardless of the sector that you're in, that people would say, if I could get my number, then I'm a seller. And if I can't, then forget it. I'll just stick with what I've got. And partly because either they have low debt or they have low costs of funds or they've owned it for a long time. And then there's not this massive motivation.
Yeah, exactly what's happening today. People are just going to wait till the market gets better. They've probably owned it a long time, and they've gotten those high offers back at the height of the market, so they're still in the files, and they know it, so they're waiting.
Yeah, and then the question is, nobody's got a crystal ball, but where do you see the market going between now and the end of the year? What if rates really just don't come down anytime soon? And even if they come down 25 or 50 basis points, is it really going to rock anybody's world to get people to move the needle one way or the other?
We were very optimistic coming into the year, and then we hit the fires, which was a tragedy that none of us expected. So we had a pause, and now we have the tariffs. And so there's been a lot of disruption in the first part of this year. We are optimistic that the second half of the year will be better, but we still have to get some certainty with the tariffs, and we need to get some stabilization with some of the interest rates, which we're starting to see. So our kind of crystal ball says the second half will be much better than the first as far as volumes and trades and things happening.
And does that uncertainty cause sellers to say, hey, maybe I'll just wait, and then the same thing on the buyer side as well?
So many people have been on the sidelines in 2022 and 2023 and 2024. They're needing to get back out.
Right. They're like, I want to make a deal.
Yeah.
I can't figure out how to make one make sense.
If you're an acquisitions person and you haven't done an acquisition for a year, you're wondering what your job is. So I get the sense that people are ready to play. However, we had a lot slower start to the year than we were expecting.
And is it easier to sell people on buying property in Southern California than other parts of the country? The pitch always was, if I buy in Michigan, I could get a 7 or an 8 cap, and if I buy in California, I get a 3 or a 4 cap, and so that's the motivation to go to another place. But if you're saying the cap rate's 5 all across the board, why would I go to Cincinnati or Cleveland? I just stay here.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I feel like that's what people are looking at right now, is that it's an opportunity to get in at good cap rates. However, there are some investors that are trying to go to more tax-friendly states, and we're seeing people, and maybe a little bit more friendly from a
governmental standpoint,
yeah,
right? I mean,
exactly.
There's a lot of regulations, a lot of bad things floating around, a lot of bad ideas that impact the commercial real estate sector. And if you're a landlord, that would affect you directly at the end of the day.
Exactly. You've seen it in multifamily.
Yes.
We still have it, and we're having it in industrial too, so we're not immune to it.
And so how does that impact what's going on? Is that really top of the list of concern, or it seems like litmus test number one would be, I got to get my return, and then the second would be, am I comfortable with the product that I'm buying and the location and all of that, and then the third is, what are these ancillary factors that are going to potentially affect my investment in the short and the long term, whether that's operating costs, whether that's governmental regulations. Nobody can predict a fire or an earthquake or a flood or something like that. But there are the things that are floating around that really make it difficult to want to be in Southern California.
I would tell you this. We have a population that is going to stay. We have the ports. We have a freeway system. We've got a reason why people want to be here. So it's not going anywhere from that perspective. But there are companies that are making the choice to go to Nevada or Arizona just because it's easier to do business there, and it's cheaper to live there. So we're seeing it.
And from a standpoint of the submarkets, Los Angeles versus an Orange County versus an Inland Empire, do you see the demand any different in one place or the next in today's world, or is it really one big market and sort of similar dynamics?
I would tell you that historically it's somewhat similar, but recently we've seen that LA and Orange County have been stronger markets, lower vacancy, a little bit tighter than the Inland Empire, and that's all the reasons we just talked about, the rent run up and the down. But my sense is that LA and Orange County is probably one of the strongest markets right now in the country, for sure, when you look at their vacancy and the demand.
Yeah, just because there's really nothing available. What about some of these projects, and we've seen it here in Orange County off the 55 freeway and other places, where they're tearing down an older office building or they're tearing down a retail center which has a lot of land, and then the highest and best use, while it might be multifamily, is also industrial. And so you have these brand new state-of-the-art industrial buildings being built, one, because the cost of construction is much less and the time frame is much quicker, but it seems like that's a much better use than a lot of other things.
Yeah, there's no question we have too much office space. So to the extent your underlying zoning will allow for something different, that's the highest and best use. We've sold several office buildings that are going to be torn down, beautiful buildings, but there's just too much office space and not the demand. So we're going to see this. It's going to be a trend, and hopefully it helps the office market by firming it up.
Yeah. And then the other question is, there are these governmental regulations that now require developers that are going to build new to not be close to residential. And so you see this in the Inland Empire, I think, all the time, where you've got a great piece of land that's just sitting there. Somebody wants to build an industrial building on it, and then they go, you can't.
Sensitive receptors. We can't be close to sensitive receptors. That's a big kind of buzzword. AB 98 got passed. Some say it's going to get rejiggered, but it could get rejiggered for the worse or for the better. We don't know yet. So there is some uncertainty there. If you own existing product, you're in a good position. That's in a good location because there's going to be less new construction.
Right. Just more value longer term. And then I guess we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about insurance, because I'm living it, and I got dropped from 3 policies last week for absolutely no reason. And so it seems like insurance companies are trying to get out of the market. They're paying out big dollars for the fires in Los Angeles and then trying to shed their exposure in Southern California, I think, as a knee-jerk. But then overall, buildings that are older, buildings that maybe weren't renovated, the insurance company used to come back and say, we want you to fix this, or we want you to upgrade that. And it used to be a suggestion, then it was a requirement, and now there's no ask, it's just you're dropped and then go try and find somebody else, and good luck with that.
Insurance and operating costs are really a big issue today. Most people can't get insurance if they're in certain areas, and then that's very difficult. My sense is that we're going to have to come up with some sort of a solution statewide. Hopefully we can get our arms around it. Short term, it's going to be very difficult, and costs are skyrocketing.
Yeah, and in the industrial market, for those folks out there that aren't aware, most of the industrial leases are what we call triple net, which means that the landlord will pass that cost on to the tenant. And so from a tenant's perspective, if the cost of the insurance policy doubles from one year to the next, and the landlord passes it through to the tenant, it really was a tenant cost and not so much a landlord cost. It does feed into the bigger picture of owning the property, but that's huge exposure for the tenant.
Yeah, so we're looking at more gross leases versus net, or at least understanding what the gross to net is for that very reason, because tenants want to understand, what are my all-in costs? How much is it going to cost me to be here? That includes taxes, insurance, maintenance, etc.
Yeah, and then you still have the cost of power and water and gas, and everything has gone up from those utility providers, and that's just a global thing, but that also feeds into just general costs of operation.
Yeah, one big issue in industrial right now is power and the availability of power. A lot of projects are stalled because they just aren't getting the power into the building. So that's something we're watching closely in California.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about was manufacturing versus distribution, because it used to be that there was quite a bit of manufacturing back in the day in Southern California, aerospace, biotech, and really other widgets that people were making. And a lot of those folks either left, went out of business, or just struggled to make sense of it unless their cost basis is really low. If you're a manufacturer and you're looking for manufacturing space, the good news is there are older buildings that have lower ceiling height that would work for you. The bad news is it's just very expensive to get up and running.
We're starting to see a resurgence of manufacturing because people don't want to be dependent on other countries, and so we're going to see more manufacturers come back. But again, if we don't solve the power issue, we're going to have some issues trying to get those folks into California. They might say there's other areas that are more arms wide open to welcome us. So we'll see. There's a lot of the border cities right now are doing very well because of that, and we're starting to see a kind of a strategy where folks are looking to diversify their risk.
Yeah. And so what is your advice to, I guess we'll start with tenants in this market. What's the strategy in terms of negotiating and dealing with your facilities in advance, and what should you be prepared for?
You're going to be prepared for some increases no matter what. But I would say go look at your alternatives and see what's out there, because in some cases what we're finding is that there's landlords willing to really cut some pretty attractive deals. However, you got to look at the cost of moving. So tenants have a tough time right now because rents have gone up so much. They're really having to consider, what are my costs of moving? What are my alternatives? And certainly moving farther out isn't necessarily always the right thing with drayage.
Yeah, and I find that some of the dynamics that used to always exist between landlord and tenant have come back. They went out the window when the market was hot. Credit is important, right? At the end of the day, it wasn't for a while. Hey, you're going to pay me more, I'll take it. And then the question is, you could pay me whatever you want, but if you're not here to pay it, then it's a problem. And then length of term of lease, right? And the use itself, because some uses are a problem for the bank or a problem for an insurance company and creates more risk for the landlord.
Yeah, there was a period of time where people were saying, if you don't sign this lease within 2 weeks, the rent's going to go up.
Yeah.
Those days are gone.
Right. No, we had an office in the Bay Area during the .com, and it was, if you're not here by 2 o'clock with a cashier's check, I'm going to give it to someone else. And that's crazy stuff.
Yeah, it's reversed, so it's a little bit more of a tenant's market, which is probably healthy, and we're seeing that there's concessions back in the market. But there was a time where there was just,
zero.
Yeah, zero.
Literally zero. And so no different than the residential market, I think. People were used to selling their house with 10 offers in a day and a half, and now it takes 60 or 90 days to sell. And so it's more of a balance, which I think helps with the expectations. Because the flip side of it is, if I feel like the market is going south, I just stall, and it's hard to get people to come together.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in terms of your group at CBRE, we only have a couple of minutes left, but I want to touch on that. So you guys deal with stuff all over the country and have what I'll call partnership offices throughout the CBRE network in different cities around the country as well.
Yeah, we're very unique. National Partners, which is a part of CBRE, is the largest industrial capital markets platform in the U.S., and we have offices everywhere. It allows us to share where buyers are moving, trends, etc. And it's been a great game changer. We've been in existence for over 15 years and really helped my career because it gives you just so much more knowledge and ability to serve your clients.
And if your clients want to go to other markets or compare one market to the other, you don't have to be an expert per se in every single market. You've got people that can help you do that.
Correct. We're like a law firm. We fee share,
yeah.
And it's been a game changer.
And so in terms of your group, though, in Southern California, you really do cover the whole breadth of the 4 or 5 different counties and have full coverage and full experience in all those markets.
Yep. West Coast. We're the leaders of the West Coast market out here.
So if people want to find out more information about CBRE or about your team and what you do, what would be the website that they would go to?
You would go to the CBRE website and type in National Partners, and you'd get the whole idea of the logistics. We also have a very strong logistics platform on our website as well.
Got it. Or you could just Google Big Hitter and then your picture shows up.
There you go.
Okay. In terms of things that keep you up at night, what would be the biggest factor that you and your group are looking at that you think will affect what's happening with the real estate markets here in Southern California? Is it interest rates? Is it supply and demand? Is it the tariffs or whatever? Or you sleep okay?
Yeah, I sleep okay, but I would say tariffs right now are just the issue of the day, because it's causing corporate America once again to step back and not want to do things. And then the second thing would be interest rates, but that's going to be here to stay.
Yeah, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that what I'm hearing is Southern California real estate, long-term, good place to be.
Good place to be, yes.
Good. On that note, I appreciate you coming in and sharing all your thoughts. It was a pleasure, and your insight, and I wish you and your family and your team continued great success, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Good. So I am Barry Saywitz. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. Again, we will be back here next week talking more real estate. Thanks to everybody here at OC Talk Radio for making it happen. We'll see you back here next time. Thanks a lot.
There you have it. You've been listening to Let's Talk Real Estate, your weekly BS with Barry Saywitz about the current state of the real commercial real estate market right here in Southern California. On Orange County's only community radio station, OC Talk Radio, streaming live from our studio here at the University of California Irvine's Beale Applied Innovation Center.